on point. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Laura Walker will start with some introductions, and then we'll go from there. And then hopefully.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Caveira. I'm Dr. Lenore Walker, and I'm very excited to be one of the co-chairs of this COVID interpersonal violence group, COVIDIPV, which is our signal. And we are thrilled to be able to start our very first roundtable. We plan to have these roundtables every Thursday at noon. And people will sometimes be able to come, sometimes not, but we're going to try to do it regularly. And we've got them all set up for the next 5 or 6 weeks now. And you can find each of the topics that you might be interested on. They'll be posted on our Facebook page. We also have at COVIDIPV on Instagram, and we tweet on Twitter as well, and we're on LinkedIn. So we're trying to take advantage of social media as much as possible. We are part of the American Psychological Association's interdivisional task force. We have about 13 or 14 divisions now that within the APA that are part of the task force. That means that members in those divisions can join us at any point. And we have right now, I think about 7 or 8 working groups and several others that are also going to be working in addition to our interpersonal violence group. So we're working with providing support for therapists and in the community. Our original purpose, our mission, was to be able to help as many mental health professionals as possible to really be able to deal with the psychological effects and the trauma effects of the COVID pandemic. And so that was why we started, and we started as a very volunteer group. We just sent out emails and said, are you interested? Division 56, which is the trauma division, and Division 39, which is the division on psychoanalysis, were really the originators and pushed the development of this particular interdivisional task force, and many of the other divisions, mostly those that provide practice, different kinds of specialized areas for people who are doing practice, have also been very involved in offering it to our members. At one point, we had over 100 people joining in our large meetings, which occur on Fridays. And they've just gone back to 12 noon. Were back and forth between 12 and 1 o'clock, and I'm talking Eastern time right now. But we have people I'm going to introduce to you in a moment, some of the people from our task force who are on this call, and tell you how we're going to work the roundtables. So we have a very big variety of people at different stages of our careers, and people who represent all kinds of diversity groups, because one of our biggest goals was to make sure that all people who needed our services had access. We know that the one thing that COVID has brought clear to everybody is that access to healthcare is not fair, not equitable. And so most of us really want to try to make it as equitable as possible. We were very surprised once we started dealing with putting our materials out for mental health professionals that many people joined in and we decided then to make our materials user-friendly for everybody. So we're friendly, we hope, for lay people as well as for people who are specializing in delivering services. We hope that you'll be excited as we are, because we're really learning, all of us are learning at the same time how to modify what we know how to do to be able to attract people with and help people as we go through this worldwide pandemic together. So let me start by telling you I'm going to first introduce our group. So you see the people who are on, who have been part of our group that are working with us. And then I think two of our group are going to do a short presentation, and we'll mute everybody during that period of time. And then we're going to open up the mics. We also have the chat functioning working on Zoom, and we have the ability to read questions that people might ask us on Facebook, because we're both live on Facebook and we're live on Zoom as well. And then so after the presentations, we're then going to just have a roundtable discussion. And hopefully we'll see where it goes. It's going to be new and exciting for us as well. So with that, let me start. You met Dr. Giselle Gaviria when we first started, because she's hosting and she's going to be one of our presenters. And she is a psychologist who is working in Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton, West Palm Beach, Florida, where I am working as well. And next to her on my screen is Dr. Rohini Gupta, and she is a professor at the University of Denver, and she's in private practice as a psychologist in Denver, just building her private practice for those of you who are local in Denver. If we go down to the next line on my computer, it may be different, so wave when I introduce you, is Marilyn Sefer, who is in Israel. She's coming to us from Haifa, Israel, and we're very excited because we are an international group. She has also been on the faculty at the University of Haifa, actually started one of the very first women's studies programs, and works as a psychologist there with many of the groups in Israel as well. And then we have a new member who is Dr. Dawn Hughes, who is a psychologist and psychotherapist in New York City, and she's also an expert witness in many of the cases that involve battered women and victims of other forms of gender violence. Next to her is Dr. Larry Gerstein, and he is with the Peace Center in Indiana, is it, I think? And also is a professor at the university, runs the Peace Center, and has been working with us to really make sure that we're not just about violence, but we're also about nonviolence. And we're very grateful for all of his contributions to our work. And last but not least is Dr. Patricia Villavicencio. And Dr. Villavicencio is in Madrid, Spain. And she is also a psychologist, a professor at the Complutense University, and works at the public hospital, as well as having her own independent practice in Madrid. So that's the group that I can see right now. I know we have one non-video participant, but I don't think it's somebody from our group, but we will get to you after the presentations. So if anybody has any questions, I'm going to check the chat box just to make sure. And anybody who's not part of our task force, please sign in on the chat with your email so that we can make sure that you get other emails from us as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gaviria, who is going to, no, I think it's Dr. Gupta who's going to start. Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. So yeah, getting started today, really thinking about what are some strategies and techniques and ways for us to manage distress in this very, as Dr. Wachter talked about, an overwhelming time. And so I'm going to start today with talking about the power of our breath. Breathing signals the body to be calm even when our muscles are not. And specifically, deep and smooth breathing directly impacts the calming of the nervous system and brings your mind to a state of attention and presence. Breath is used in many Eastern traditions and ancient traditions. And in the field of psychology, we've been incorporating breath as a method of healing, as a way for us to feel a sense of calm. So there are many different methods in terms of breathing, and some of them are very simple to learn and to do on your own, but they certainly take practice and time to fully be able to allow yourself to quiet your mind and also stay focused in the present with your breath and with yourself. So one technique I want to share today is diaphragmatic breathing. This type of breath slows your heartbeat and can also lower your blood pressure. It can decrease the body's alarm system, that fight or flight response that we can experience when we're distressed and overwhelmed, and it can make it hard for us to think and make decisions. And so when you're feeling that overwhelm, it can be helpful to think about how we might use breath to help calm our bodies and ourselves. So I just want to invite people to breathe with me. And so I'm just in the next minute, I'm going to kind of talk us through that. So I invite you to sit comfortably in your seat, to move around, move your shoulders, do what you need to do to feel comfortable, feeling the chair holding you. If you feel comfortable, to lay on the floor with your knees up, whatever it is, however it is that you want to sit while we do this, please do that. And then what I want you to do, put one hand on your upper chest and put one hand below your rib cage. Now that hand that is below your rib cage, that is where the diaphragm is. And what I invite you to do is inhale slowly through your nose, pushing against the hand placed on your diaphragm. You will notice your belly expanding. Exhale through your mouth and tighten your stomach muscles to release the air as you do this. And you'll notice your stomach contracting. So breathe in, the belly expands. Breathe out, the belly contracts. Let's take 3 breaths together doing this. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. One last breath together, breathing in, breathing out. Now I'm going to invite you to take 3 more breaths on your own. Breathing in, out, in, out, in, and out. Now just take a minute and just notice anything that is coming up for you in this moment. Any thoughts, any feelings in your body, anything that you might be noticing. Do you feel a state of calm? Do you feel more anxiety? Do you feel at ease? And so I just want to say, some of you may find this easy and some of you may find this more difficult. Regardless of your experience, I encourage you to keep practicing and doing this maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day in a comfortable and quiet place. And the great thing about diaphragmatic breathing is that it can really be done anywhere. and can provide a great deal of benefit in a short period of time. Now, sometimes it can be hard to do this on your own and stay motivated to do so. And there are a number of apps that can help with this. And I'm going to then kind of pass it over to Giselle, who will talk a little bit about other ways to help support well-being and a sense of calm, particularly related to apps. So Giselle, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you for allowing us to calm ourselves a little bit before we start. And it was very soothing, being able to bring back to the center and being present. So my name is Dr. Giselle Gaviria, and today I'm actually going to be talking to you a little bit about some of these apps that I've been using with my clients and that have been recommended by other clinicians as well as therapists working in the mental health area. Particularly right now, some of them have been rated pretty high within the app stores on your phone, as well as in the internet and the recommendations that have been given. I'm gonna just talk about 7 of them that are in particular. Hold on one second. I'm gonna share screen so that you are able to see at least what the app looks like, the name and the value, because some of them I try to gather information for apps that would be free or that would be at a limited cost of $2 or $3, or it could extend itself to up to $12. But some of these also have things that you could still use at a free, at the free range. Hold on one second. So many individuals have found these apps very useful, but we're not endorsing any of them. We're just here to share the information for all of you to learn. And then the first one that I brought up is iMood Journal. And it's actually very colorful, very bright, and it has a $2.99 value if you could use it on either Apple or Androids or Google phones, and it's part of a personal journal, a mood tracker, and it helps you distinguish where you're going in the patterns and what's going on when you're having. You could even take pictures of yourself during this process to see how you're looking, particularly during the time being. You know, and I think that this would be a great app for individuals and clients or individuals who are having difficulty understanding where they are with their mood. The next one is actually a very interesting app. It's called Mood Tools, and it was actually created by 2 students from Duke University. And this one is free, but then they have added apps that you can be using to log and analyze your thoughts using cognitive behavioral therapy principles. And it also gears you towards videos, TED Talks that could be potentially useful for when you are having any difficulties at that time. This one in particular is good for individuals who may be feeling blue, some symptoms of depression. So this one's a free app. And then there's a Mood Shift. It's another one, and it's very colorful as well. And this one is designed for teens and young adults who have been having symptoms of anxiety. So this one is very good as well, and it's also a free one. Headspace, which many of you probably have already heard of for meditation, and a lot of the ones that I've already discussed incorporate meditation within it with different types of titles of meditations and breathing techniques that you can use during this whole process. Now, this one's a little bit more pricey, but I do know that they have limited selection that is free. This one's $12.99. And then the next one, which I personally enjoy because it also helps you monitor your sleep and also has some free, but also it's $12.99, or they have a yearly subscription, and they help you for individuals who are having difficulty sleeping. They have readings of books that will make you fall asleep within 20 minutes, because I still haven't been able to even get through a whole story. That's how it is. All I know is about lilacs in Provence, and that's at the end of the I don't know what happens. But this one's actually pretty good, and it has It has different types of sounds that you can play in the background to really mellow yourself and calm yourself, and use these techniques to help you through it. Now, this one is for those individuals who have been diagnosed with PTSD. This was actually created by the VA, and it also helps you self-assess and opportunities to find a positive self-talk and anger management. And then this one has been pretty well used and distributed among clinicians and other providers. And then at the end, this one is Think Up, which I feel like many of us with this whole COVID situation, with the situations that we may be having at home, we have this negative self-talk. This is actually about bringing positive thinking and affirmations. And it's a free app, and it really helps you increase your mood, and you can schedule times where you are able to do your affirmations. And is really helpful for individuals who have negative self-talk or self-esteem, self-worth. It's really helpful. And that'll be all. At least there are multiple apps that can be used, but these are some of the things that I thought were pretty useful. A lot of them are free, as you noticed, that I think is important for a lot of individuals right now. Any questions, comments?
Those are great, Giselle.
Yeah, I wanted to incorporate a variety so that you're not just, oh, it's just this one. There's multiple, and there's actually even more, but I tried to see the ones that were rated higher with people who were using it and who were also recommended by other individuals. Some of them were created with the help of psychologists, and some of them were students.
I know there are also a lot of apps on the VA Center, the Veterans Administration Center. They have created, because it's been so difficult for some veterans to be able to get services, they've been able to create quite a few apps. And there's a brand new one that's just coming out that Rohini and I are on the same task force on PTSD, and one of our other colleagues has shared with us on sexual harassment. So for people, I believe I don't know whether it's for both women and men, but certainly for women, because it's so much more common for women to experience sexual harassment. It's also been an app that they've just brought out, and we've been waiting for her to teach it to us.
Yes. And I will say, with apps, what can be really helpful is, especially if you're having difficulty accessing psychotherapy, that kind of utilizing these until perhaps you can access psychotherapy. Also, using it in conjunction with psychotherapy can be really helpful, especially when you're wanting to do that work in between sessions, for example.
And that's something I actually recommend some of my clients, is to be able to see where their mood was, what were they doing within those high periods that they were feeling a lot more content, versus what was going on in those moments, those low periods. So they're able to see it, and I'm able to also see it. What are these triggering events, or what is going on during this time? And are they
one of the most important things? Oh, go ahead, Larry. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, did you think I was talking, Lenore?
I did.
Maybe I was talking to myself.
I thought you were listening.
That's funny. Yeah, I was typing in. Maybe I was going to suggest, Giselle, that these are great. I was wondering if there was some central location where they're sitting, so you can point anyone who wants them.
I'm actually gonna plan to make a picture out of it with at least the ones that were discussed today, for it to be one of the central pictures, and where to find them. So you could just type it up on the App Store on your phone, and then they should be able to come up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about. I just think, yeah. I think it's a good idea if you centralize it somehow.
I will.
Yep.
That is. I wanted to do it.
Our group does have a Google Drive. I don't think we use it very much.
Well, I was thinking about the wider audience.
Aha.
Yeah. the
I'm
wider audience.
I'm planning to make a picture poster to then post it and distribute it.
And we could, yeah, we can put it on our Facebook pages
Yep.
too.
Yep.
It'd
Yep.
be great.
Yep. Yep.
There's also Giselle, the CBTI app for sleep, which is also from the National Center for PTSD, which is really helpful to add to that people can start to, obviously the anxiety and trauma goes up, sleep goes out the window, so that they can have an opportunity to see that too. And then I just have a comment about Dr. Goop. I love what you're doing about the breath. You know, I've been doing this work with the breath and the breathing, the relaxation for 25 years. And then I fall off of it. And then, you know, but in COVID, I came back to it because I was doing all of the work with the first responders in the epicenter, you know, on the faculty of Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian Hospital. And, you know, everyone always says, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to breathe. So we kind of came up with was sort of this mindfulness on the go. So I had like every time that they would have to wash their hands, I would say, allow yourself to focus on your breath. You know, and one of the mantras that I came up with, which a lot of, again, nurses, respiratory therapists, ER docs, you know, I mean, the hospital was, I mean, it was really insane. I of all the traumas I went through, starting with Hurricane Andrew down in Fort Lauderdale, you know, to being here in 9/11 and Hurricane Sam, I mean, all of them. This is very, very unique. But so having them have breath, conscious of their breath when they had to wash their hands, which, you know, in a hospital setting, you have to all the time. And kind of we came up with the mantra sort of, may I be safe, may I be healthy, may I have peace of mind, you know, and they were able to kind of grab onto that. Like I could do that, you know, so it doesn't have to be, I have to meditate for 30 minutes,
Yes.
you know, but if I can have 30 seconds, every time I go to the bathroom, can I have my mantra? Like, what can you bring with you? Because like you said, your breath is with you wherever you go.
Mm-hmm.
It is practice. So even doing the little exercise for you, because I've been doing with clients some more, like I can get into that relaxation state pretty quickly, which is awesome, right? And it's just kind of training your body to do that and letting people know that you can train your body to do that.
Yeah, I love that, Dawn, because I think, you know, it's so easy to not pay attention to your breath. And when you're overwhelmed, right, holding your breath and realizing you're breathing really shortly. So I love this idea that how do you build it into your day in a way that feels seamless, where it's not, you know, washing your hands. Or I've had clients who are really intentional, who really want to focus on how do I really pay attention to my breath, and they put like an alarm on their phone, right? So that they're taking a break as a reminder of, okay, I'm going to take a minute to breathe. But how foundational breath is. And it is interesting, right? When we're overwhelmed and stressed, that's sort of one of the things that goes out the window. So I love that, that suggestion that you've made for some of the frontline workers.
And also how we breathe. You mentioned sort of, you know, hand on your belly, hand on your heart. That's how I talk about it. You talk to a little differently. But as women, we suck in our stomach all the time. Yes. Like, if you've ever seen a baby breathe, you were inflating the balloon and then you're deflating. Like, push that belly out, man. Like, you know, you got to get all that breath in. Take it in and then release it. So it's really hard even getting people to recognize that I have to push that belly all the way out.
Yes. Yes. I love that. It's how you breathe too, because again, we can tend to be shallow. We can breathe in a shallow way or hold our breath when we don't even realize it. So, so yeah, those physical sort of your hand on your heart, your hand on your belly, to really help ground you in your body as well.
You know, I was using that technique in working with students who have experienced test anxiety, because it's very easy to do when you come in and sit down and you have a technique that relaxes. But one of the things that I added is sometimes because of the extreme muscle tension is distress, as if you're, you know, kind of tired, as an additional way of sort of releasing some of the tension with a technique that doesn't call it attention to your being tense. It's been very helpful with a lot of students.
Yeah, especially think about that tension that can be there in our bodies, right? So this idea of how do you tune into that? And I'm thinking then that's foundational piece too of the body scan. How sometimes, right, with the clients that I work with and the communities I work with, we might start a meeting or a session with a body scan and notice where the tension is, and then breathing into that. area and breathing it in and then releasing, that tension. So that's, Marilyn, thanks for bringing up that somatic piece, right? And how we can store stress and anxiety in our bodies. And so how do we pay attention to that just as much as we might pay attention to our thoughts and our feelings? So super important.
Larry, I think you're gonna share with us some ideas about different cultures and how they use some of these techniques.
Yeah. Thanks, Lenore. And I can spin off of what Dawn was talking about. I really like that focus, that particular meditation, and how it's in your day-to-day experience. So it's an active way of engaging. It's much better than singing happy birthday.
Yeah, I don't like the happy birthday.
Yeah. And what struck me, I really like the mantra. I wanted to suggest that maybe you include one other line in it, and it would be, may others be safe as well.
So I do both. So you do for yourself, right? Because we need to take care of yourself, and then you pay it forward. And what I say in that sort of mindfulness exercise, it may be a patient you just left, and maybe you're thinking about your mom, and maybe you're thinking about your senile dog, like whatever it is at that moment. And then we say, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be peace of mind. So we do the both.
Great. So I'm a long time student of Asian philosophy and religion, and one of the things that really is powerful is the idea that in those practices, unlike the Judeo-Christian Islamic practices, their prayers are done for the benefit of all sentient beings, not themselves. So the meditation or the mantra is really more about the interconnectedness of us all, and even like taking vitamins or medicine, or going to a doctor for an examination or a surgery. The mindset is that I'm doing these things not for the benefit of me, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. And it really changes the kind of the cognitive focus. And I think right now it's even more important for us to, and I not everyone believes this, more important for us to recognize that we're interdependent. And there's no way of really escaping that. I mean, the physicists tell us that too. So yeah, I wanted to share that part. And that's not what I had planned to chip in today, but I think it's really relevant to what you're talking about. And I really like Thich Nhat Hanh's work around meditation and mantra, because it's a living practice, and it has the ability, and I mean, I try to use that all the time. Like, the opportunity today, I was at the bank, I had to wait forever. And I try to reframe it and think about it. Okay, this is an opportunity for me to practice calming myself down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
I was going to chip in about emotion regulation, but if there's not time, I'll pass on it.
No, we have time.
Okay.
We definitely do have time, and we're opening. This is, I guess, a little bit more different than what we expected it to be. We're chiming in whenever we have a comment or concern or a question. But no, definitely, Larry, we wanted to hear what you had to say.
Yeah, so similar to what I was saying about how different cultures approach meditation and the practice really of daily living, there are also really huge differences in emotion regulation around the world and what that means to people. So, for instance, again, I know Asian cultures pretty well. In Asian cultures, a stranger is not going to see your anger. It's considered a gift to let somebody see your anger. So there are lots of implications to that, right? As far as domestic violence and interpersonal violence are concerned, because the perpetrator might not fess up to it very easily and be more resistant to it than what we're normally accustomed to experiencing when people come in. So if you see somebody's anger, an Asian's anger, then you know you're good friends and you know you're intimate. And in fact, I've heard people say, I only share my anger with my wife or my husband. Nobody else gets to see it. So it kind of takes this idea of violence in a different direction and makes it more difficult, I think, to get at. The other piece that I wanted to share is that the emotions regulation strategies that are used by people around the world vary. So while we think that suppression and cognitive reappraisal are universal, and they could be, the research is out on that right now, how they're used varies. So for Asians and some other populations around the world, they will suppress extremes of emotion because the dialectic is where they live. You know, you can't have joy without sorrow. You can't have sadness without happiness. And so they kind of move themselves, they navigate their emotional world in relation to that dialectic. And I think some scholars in Asia have been real critical of positive psychology in that regard as a goal, because happiness is not a goal for everyone. The dialectic is a goal. You know, humble, if you want to be humble, then you don't show your happiness, you don't show your pride. You try to regulate it to a point where, you know, you're managing both at the same time. I'll stop there.
That's very interesting. Wanted to pick up for a minute on what you were saying about some Asian cultures where they only show their anger at home. Certainly, when we're dealing with domestic violence and battered women, how do you tell the difference between anger that's going to escalate to something that's more serious versus just being able to express yourself in a safe place? And these are things that I think our group has been really trying to deal with. It's been quite important for me to learn that a lot of what I've been teaching people about domestic violence does not work in this pandemic. For example, we can't spend a lot of time doing long exercises. The short ones that we're doing today, I think, are much more likely to be used during this pandemic. Maybe they would have been better all along, I don't know, because we started doing what we knew. You know, psychotherapists, we did 45-minute or 50-minute sessions, and so we had to fill it with information. The other thing is that we have to really teach people who are involved with the escalation of domestic violence, and we know it's 3 times more likely, at least, in all countries across the world that have been reporting. And so we have to really be able to teach people how to calm themselves down and help calm the other person that they may be quarantining with, who is getting more and more angry. And so, the cultural clash between the two, I think, is a conundrum that we have to work with and figure out, how do we do that? How do we make it safe for everybody? Is to quarantine at home, to stay at home. Any other comments about that?
I agree wholeheartedly, Lenore. I mean, we certainly also are having the compounding effects of the anxiety and the trauma and the stress of being with your partner who is engaging in abusive behavior. And then just this collective anxiety and stress of the unpredictability, the uncontrollability of what's happening in our world, in our just outdoor at our windows. So I think that certainly my clients are definitely feeling that sort of compounded anxious effect, which really makes them sometimes ineffectual because it's so overwhelming. So really dealing with sort of reducing kind of that and being attentive to that emotional regulation. How do you really up the ante in the self-care, right? How are you balancing all these compliance, submission strategies, because that's safer, because he's not going out to work 10 hours a day. He's right there, right?
And there's no place for you to go.
And there's no place for you to go. So that's that inherent conflict that, sort of really processing it in a new way, to try to keep people safe and sane.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I just want to add, like, the self-care piece versus, I like to think of community care, in the sense that, I think there can be a feeling of, when it's self-care, I'm doing something wrong, like I'm not doing enough. Whereas how do we think about caring for each other in terms of a community approach, when we kind of talk about that we're the connection, we're interdependent. And so how do we kind of create those spaces, I think, is one of the things I think about in terms of preventing and managing overwhelm and distress. And I think the second piece I wanted to also comment about is that idea of perspective taking. And it's interesting, right, when you come from sort of an Eastern tradition where the belief is suffering is part of life versus we shouldn't be suffering. And so it's interesting then, for example, we kind of look at that, is that if there is the perspective of suffering as part of life, then, does that may in itself, that perspective taking may decrease the stress, because there's less dissonance between this is how the world should be and this is what I experience. And so it's interesting to kind of think about that from how also you approach this pandemic and this time and the overwhelm that's happening. And so I just wanted to add that piece of how perspective taking can also decrease overwhelm and anxiety.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you brought that up, because, in therapy, people use that idea of, let's reframe the situation, right, and look at the positive. But from the Eastern perspective, suffering's a gift. Embrace it, enjoy it, because it's your opportunity to help the community. That's really a completely different way of looking at it. And don't burden yourself with worrying about it, because you got this chance to do good.
Wow.
The contrarian that I would say, but I think it's different when the suffering's being imposed upon you by another, right? I think you're right. Like I do a lot of kind of radical acceptance. Like, we can't change this pandemic right now, right? What do we, how do we sit with that and not tolerate that uncertainty? But when the suffering is coming at the hand of another with sort of deliberate, strategic, motives and intentions, it's a lot harder to say, okay, I'm just going to hold on to that suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot harder, right? But if you do believe in that interdependent kind of explanation of then you're kind of responsible for it happening too.
Oh boy. when you work in the area.
Isn't it the highway for Lenora?
No, but I mean, we can go back to its perspective, right?
That would be
No, and I think you can accept suffering, but it doesn't mean that you don't do anything about it. I mean, I think we want to clarify, right? Like how you approach the struggles you're having doesn't mean that you don't do anything about struggles or don't do anything if you're being hurt by another, right? And so I think there's a fine line there.
I think we have to be very clear, though, that when it comes to domestic violence, we don't want women to be responsible or to think that they're responsible for the man's actions. They may well be behaving in a bad way and in a way that they need to look at themselves and what they can do differently. But he's the one who has to be responsible for his reaction to it. And we have spent years and years trying to clarify that. So these are all nuances, I think, that are so important to make clear when we talk about responsibility. Because I agree that when what you're saying makes a lot of sense about the COVID virus, why the Americans can't seem to all wear masks, why they are resistant to helping other people not get sick. So I see it there, but in interpersonal violence, I think the perspective has to be different.
Yeah, there may be, I was just gonna say there may be compounded stressors, but when we think about domestic violence, we're thinking about power and control.
Yes.
So, right, if you think about their compounded stressors, what you do with that is important. When you start to sort of overpower someone or to be controlling, like that's something different. And so, right, so thinking about behavior in that way, I think is really important. And I'm sorry, Dawn, I think I had interrupted you. So
I like your reframe too. And I think, clearly sort of what's endemic when we start in these relationships that, evolve into violence is that self-blame, is that sort of misattribution of responsibility. So kind of most women find themselves there immediately, like, what did I do if I only did this? And again, that's the messaging that's being given, right? If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have to hit you. Why do you have to be such a via? All of these things. So it's, we also know, kind of going back a little to Larry's comments earlier, it's not about anger. Right? It's about the misuse of power and control, right? Anger sometimes intrudes, obviously, but it's about somebody who now, is around all the time, continuing to sort of impose their will on another, almost in this relentless approach, because there's no way out, right? And saying, well, you can't go out because of COVID, and you can't take the car, and you're not going to go to the market, and you can't go to the post office, and now you're a prisoner in your own home, way more so than you were before, because you had, maybe 10 hours a day where you weren't around this individual.
And I think, Lenore, you had said, like before, I mean, that knowing that line, what is anger and compounded by stress, and then what is violence, right? And that being very
so important. I know that in the work that I've done, I look at my own background, and in my family, people were always yelling, screaming. I mean, anger or emotions were always encouraged and expressed. But they did not lead into any kind of power and control issues. They really were just, well, I'm going to say what I think and what I feel. And so it was safe to be able to do that. In homes where there's domestic violence, it's not safe because people take advantage of the other person's emotions and try to manipulate them to their will. And so we have to pay attention to not only the culture of diversity, but also the culture within our different homes that make it very different in how we can express things.
Well, and different even just within cultures. So I'm thinking about sort of Indian culture. And so my family is Punjabi, right? And as Punjabis, like we say what we feel, we don't hold back. It's really different from, let's say, someone from a different, region in India. So there, so it's that piece between there's the cultural piece, but there's also the family piece, there's the individual piece. And
Absolutely.
so, just wanted to highlight that because I don't want to lose sight of all of those pieces as we're talking about how people express or show or regulate emotions, that can really vary even within regions and even within families.
Exactly. And we have to be, as those of us who are therapists working with other people, we have to be able to accept all those variations and not try to make it the way we think it should be. And that's oftentimes a skill in treatment to be able to do that.
That's an understatement, Lenore. a big understatement.
Well, it's true. My favorite statement when I'm training students is to tell them that timing is everything. You can say something one way at one point and you say it in the same exact way at another point, and it's totally received differently.
Yes.
So all of these things are factors that we have to deal with. And it's no different when we're dealing with somebody who has the overlay of trauma, as Dawn, you were saying, on top of the normal kinds of, or whatever normal might be for people. So it's an interesting balance that we're always trying to work with.
Just add the critical ingredient, right, of having, your family, Dr. Gupta's family, it doesn't have that element of fear, right? It doesn't have that element of robbing choice making. It doesn't have that element of, do I have to ask permission to do something? Or if I do, right? All of these things that go through women's minds for something simple as wanting to go get an avocado sandwich, So it robs that freedom of thought, of movement, that, those are those critical ingredients when I talk to people about, are you afraid to say what you think? What does it mean when you say, why don't I ask? Why do you have to ask? You're not a child. Like when you start thinking about those things, that differentiates that. You want to be an explosive family, fine, but as long as everybody's safe, and everybody's respected within those, boundaries, that's a different story.
Right. Our family, you were rewarded for saying what you think. It didn't matter whether you were right or wrong. In fact, we laugh because we often say, my cousins and I, when we grew up, that we were not always right, but we were never wrong. When you grow up with that as a credo, it makes it much easier to say things that other people who didn't grow up with that kind of freedom or that kind of reward would never think to say. And you contrast that with, Larry, what you're talking about in some cultures where not only would they not express anger, they wouldn't express any emotions in front of other people.
Yeah. And there's a price that they pay too, at least from the outsider's view, and that's that the anger builds up, and boom.
But there's also a price to be paid by talking too much.
Yep.
You have to learn.
Yep.
Growing up, you have to learn when it's okay and when you should not be talking. Some of us family don't always get that.
So there's another interesting piece to this that I didn't mention, but maybe is important, in that the nonverbal behavior varies too. So how we show emotion in our face does vary by culture. So for some cultures, you'll get more out of looking at the mouth. In other cultures, you get more looking at the eye and these muscles over here.
And what's going to happen now with masks?
Yeah.
There you have it.
Exactly.
Yep. That's a good.
whole dimension.
Hard to read people. It really is.
It's really hard in our psychiatric facilities, because I was doing all the interventions with our, our psych flaws, and how you read a person when you come into the room and you're all covered up, right? Babies scan the face to see safe, not safe, happy, sad, and now we're like this, It's very tricky.
I just wanted to highlight one last thing, and I'm realizing we just have a few minutes left, but Dawn, I appreciated that you're centering this idea about fear. And I just don't want that to get lost in the sense of, right, is what's happening eliciting a sense of fear, right? Versus, right, being angry or just expressing yourself. And just that feels like a pretty central piece to highlight when we're thinking about emotions and people's emotions and what you're observing and what you're experiencing. So just
and for people who perhaps are in those situations, to allow themselves to check with themselves. Is that something that's going on? And then that's going to give you a lot of information.
Yeah.
And maybe you can get some assistance in figuring that out.
Well, I think we need to take a few minutes to kind of sum up, because we have to end it at noon. But this has been very exciting. Anybody want to say a word or two before we go?
Is there any
Yeah, you haven't said anything.
From the people on Facebook, or from, we've not seen anything on the chat from people who have joined?
We have some people who have been on Facebook, so I've been doing some of that, but you're right, we haven't had just us on the chat.
It's just us on the chat, and there are 5 people currently watching us on Facebook, so thank you very much. They are listening, and they're more than welcome to ask any questions if they'd like, but we do have several people who have been watching on and off.
Patricia, did you want to say something?
I just want to add something about children that are confined right now, not being able to play with their playmates or going to school, and how having children and teens at home increases stress in the families, and the fathers and mothers don't know how to handle this, having children around. I think they are the most vulnerable at these times. Plus, women that have suffered are suffering domestic violence. So we need to focus on how to help, grown-ups to handle their stress regarding children's anxiety during the confinement.
I think we have something planned to deal directly with children. What is Giselle, do you remember what next week's topic is going to be?
Hold on one second. Next week's topic is changing advice and tips to stay safe, sheltering with abusers.
Okay, so we'll be concentrating a little bit more on domestic violence and abusers next week.
That was August 20th, and then on the 27th, finding quiet spaces in an unpredictable world.
Okay, so we'll post it on Facebook so that those of you who have jumped on can see once again what we're planning. But this has been extremely exciting. First of all the technology worked, and I want to thank all of the people who have really worked so hard to get the technology going. We'll all be in touch.
Yes, absolutely. If you have any questions, commenting on our Facebook app, or on our Facebook group, on our Instagram, messaging, I just want to thank you all for participating. Brittany, thank you so much for helping me during this process, and everybody who's participated, and can't wait to see you all next week.
Okay.
Great conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Good to meet you, Dawn.
Good to meet you, Dawn.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.